Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a beautiful afternoon. The sun is shining. At least I think that's what that thing's called. It seems like it hasn't been around much lately, but greetings on this gorgeous day. It is April 29th. May is right around the corner, and we're starting to warm up. And I'm Carl Hawkinson. I'm with the University of Minnesota Extension, Hennepin County, and spend a lot of my time in the emerging farmer world and the agroecology realm of things. And I host this Twin Cities Metro Growers Network, where we get together and talk about things horticulture. The main idea was to not be on the computer and get together where people are at. And Mr. COVID had some other ideas. So for better or worse, we have Zoom and we can still kind of get together. And that's what we've been doing. And we are doing a second part of a two-part series where we're taking a bit of a segue away from things specifically horticulture. And with my colleague Greg and others who you'll meet in a minute, we are talking about an urban-rural exchange. And the basic idea is people in rural areas and people in urban areas are working on very similar things: sustainable ag, sustainable food, foodways, food justice, and they're working on equity and all of that. But because of distance and we just are in different circles, it's hard to get together and work together. And so we're going to see if we can't figure that out. And so these first two sessions were just to get to know a rural farm and an urban food organization of some kind. You know, if I'm in North Minneapolis, I can't just go wander out to the rural area and meet people and figure things out. I wouldn't know what to do. Likewise, if I'm out in Finland, Minnesota, I wouldn't know what's going on in North Minneapolis. So we just thought it would be great to start the dialogue and to start to share and see where we can go. Eventually, again, this fall, main idea was actually get together, break bread, and figure out some commonalities. So that in a nutshell, where we're going to go. After introductions of the main players here today, we'll learn about urban ventures and Round River Farm, and then we'll open it up to discussion about the larger discussion about building urban-rural bridges. And so with that, I have my colleague, Katie Federell, who works with Sustainable Farming Association, who I cooperate with on this network. And Katie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
For sure. I'm Katie Federell. I'm the Communications Director at Sustainable Farming Association. And SFA is a statewide nonprofit made up of networking groups like this and of our regional chapters. And those chapters operate, and SFA as a whole operates much like this group, where it's really about growers coming together and networking and learning from each other, sharing what works and helping us all improve. So we're focused, of course, on sustainable and regenerative practices and getting those to spread. And there's really a space for any type of grower of any amount of experience and interest in SFA. And I am so excited that this focus is happening within this group, because as someone who is attending the TC Growers meetings and seeing just the wide stretch of knowledge and experiences that our regional chapters, which are mostly in greater Minnesota, have, it's really cool to have this bridge happening, because there's just so much, there's so much common ground and interesting things happening. So I'm excited for this.
Thank you, Katie. And please feel free to check out the chat. I'll be posting things, and if you want to chat with people and all that, you know how to use chat by now, I hope. But that all gets recorded too. So, well, not your private discussions, but we can save all that. So that's good. Let's see, Mark, Peter, why don't we jump to you and just a brief intro on yourself, and then we'll hear from you in a bit later, more detail.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Mark Peter Lundquist, Urban Ventures Farm and Nutrition. I've been with Urban Ventures for 23 years now, not as a farmer, but as a guy who starts up programs, gets things going for the neighborhood, and the farm being just one of the outputs of my work. So it'll be fun to share with you guys what we're doing, and hoping that maybe we can share some resources as well.
Excellent, thank you. And David, why don't we go to you next?
Yeah, David Abaz with Round River Farm, quite a ways away from the Twin Cities. And I'll be sharing kind of our story and what we're about. And, looking forward to connecting with the Urban Ventures.
Excellent, thanks so much. And then Greg, why don't we go to you for introduction, and then if you could give us a little kind of summary of where this all came from.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Swazer. I work for the University of Minnesota Extension's Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships. I'll try not to take up too much of the time because I'm not the highlight here, but I just wanted to give a little background about our organization and a little bit of how this concept, this project came about. So let me share my screen here for a little bit. All right. Can you all see my slides here?
Yep.
Okay. So the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships is a program within Extension that works explicitly in Greater Minnesota. We were set up about 25 years ago by the state legislature to serve Greater Minnesota and help connect individuals with university resources, individuals, organizations, groups that were working on sustainable development projects, community-based sustainable development projects. So we work in 4 focus areas: sustainable agriculture and food systems, natural resources, clean energy, and resilient communities. So I live a couple blocks south of Lake Street, a couple blocks east of Minnehaha. When the 3rd precinct went up in flames, that was in my backyard, and house was full of smoke. So I live very distinctly in these 2 worlds, in this urban world and in this rural world. So I do feel also very connected with every corner of the state and with all of these projects, all of our people in the state, as well as my community in South Minneapolis. So when I look at this map here, this is a list of our food projects in Greater Minnesota. I know people working, individuals working in many of these projects. I'm connected into many of these projects, but it hurts a little bit. It stings a little bit that we can't connect to the city, my city folks. So until about a year ago, last May, June, it was all right. I lived in these 2 worlds. That's fine. But after what happened, after the murder of George Floyd and after the uprising and everything, I just thought, we have to do something about this. I can't just keep these worlds separate anymore. So I contacted my colleague, Connie Carlson, who also works statewide with me. And we got a hold of Carl Hackinson. We've known Carl for a while, Carl working with Hennepin County, brainstorming, what can we do? How can we bring these worlds together? And, we know that these big issues we work on, climate change, climate extinction, or, global extinction of and sustainable agriculture, all these things are intrinsically linked to racial justice and issues like that happen in our city. Because none of these issues can be solved unless we're all working on them together. Rural, urban, rich, poor, old, young, etc. None of these issues can be solved unless we're working on them together. But we can't work on them together if there are more important pressing issues that prevent us from taking everyday action and forming these bridges and forming these unions. When we have to worry about our own safety, when we have to worry about getting to and from work, when we have to worry about pandemics, when we have to worry about these things, we don't have the energy and the time to think about climate change and to work on those issues. So we decided to try to bring our 2 groups together, our community and our city community groups and our professional Greater Minnesota groups. Because I know folks working on very similar projects in Moorhead and Bemidji and Verne, Minnesota, and up in Finland where David is. This is very, very, very similar projects to the projects going on in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So we're here to try to build bridges. We're here to try to start discussions. And ultimately, it would be great if we were able to one day get on buses post-COVID. I think there's grant money available likely to fund buses, to fund some trips and get people in the city to visit some farms. And at the same time, we have got people coming in from greater Minnesota at our statewide meetings frequently in St. Paul. It'd be great to get these folks to visit some of these things going on in the cities that are wonderful things, people doing similar things, people with similar attitudes, values, all these things. Let's get them together. Let's get us together, figure out how to solve these things. Ideally, networks will form, bringing people together, networks and relationships will form, new projects will spawn out of this. And they don't have to be my projects. They don't have to be your projects necessarily, but they will be projects, and they will, they'll come about, and greater good will happen out of this. So, we started this last couple weeks ago. We had a similar meeting. Some of you were at that meeting. Some of you weren't. Before we get moving on, I just wanted to point out some of the highlights that I saw, some of the things that I saw come out of that meeting. And so I've just got a few things jotted down.
If I could just jump in, it was Appetite for Change and Prairie Drifter Farm.
Yep.
And I posted a recording there if you got nothing else to do and you want to watch it. But there was some incredible things that were said. And so go ahead, Greg, and hit the summary.
Right. So I was going to say, some of these are my thoughts. Some of these are the thoughts of Appetite for Change. Some of these are thoughts of Prairie Drifter, some thoughts from other people. And I'm not exactly sure whose are whose. They're all kind of intermelded. So I'm just going to go through them. So all of our problems, which are very real problems in urban and rural areas, different but very real problems, from violence and police brutality to our climate emergency. These things can only be addressed and solved if we come together and work together. We put people in silos based on the convenience of maintaining our narratives, our media narratives, to help ourselves understand a complex world. It's natural, sometimes it's not natural, but we put people in silos. So we need to break down these silos so that we can see each other as farmers, not urban and rural farmers, not big farmers and little farmers, or small farmers and big farmers, but just as farmers and as Minnesotans. So we're all Minnesotans, whether we live in, Brainerd, Bemidji, or Minneapolis, or St. Louis Park, St. Paul, wherever. We're all Minnesotans here. People in urban and rural spaces share values and want to connect. Food and connection to the land can be the palette to express those shared values. And finally here, there are legitimate challenges, but there are more opportunities than there are challenges. And distance is our primary challenge. And once we break down that, the rest will come. So with that, I'm going to move it on. There were more other great things shared and said, but those were just some that stuck out to me. So I will stop and move it on from here. There we go.
Thanks, Greg. No, it was a really great conversation, and this is not a typical, project. I don't think. The main concept here is we're going to make the road by walking it. We're not sure where it's going to go, but we trust in each other, and that if we do the good work, we can really make this go somewhere. And we talked about overnights and sharing resources, and we've been talking about all kinds of things, which we're going to end up here today talking about some next steps. But we really are feeling good about this. And, I think climate change, I think the way to think about that is the largest jobs program ever. We need all hands on deck in the Anthropocene here. And what better work than to take care of the earth and feed each other? It's so simple in a way, and there's so many complicated things that get in our way. And we fully realize too that everybody's really busy. And whenever you say, well, look, there's this new project, let's do this now, there's no time for it. So we really want to focus on making this worth people's while and beneficial. We only have so much time, and going to all these Zoom meetings is driving everybody nuts. So, Greg, thank you so much. All right, so let's, Mark, Peter, let's turn it back to you. And if you could just give us a little rundown of what Urban Ventures is all about, and then your food production and distribution work, and then a few thoughts on what your thoughts are with the urban-rural exchange of this kind.
Okay. Is my voice coming through for everybody?
I can hear it.
Okay. Good. So Urban Ventures is a CDC, a Community Development Corporation. And the goal for us is to see every kid within 25 square blocks graduate from high school and move on to some form of post-secondary. And so we do a lot of programs that dovetail into that common goal: parenting and fitness and music and just a plethora of different programs. But that's the final result, is to see kids graduate and move on. So we have two really neat scholarship programs, one called Act 6. So we award about 50 neighborhood kids full ride 4-year scholarships. So we do that every year. Then we have a Jennings Scholarship Fund, which funds two young people a year at Dunwoody. So everything paid for. So that's kind of the 10,000-foot view of Urban Ventures. How we fit into it is that we know nutrition is a big part of any kind of academic work, and if kids aren't eating right, then school doesn't go right, and there's all kinds of behavior issues and stuff like that. So that was our venture, was with kids and nutrition. It still is, but we began to notice through our feeding program called the Kids Cafe that a lot of kids were taking stuff home with them. So we realized that there was some food insecurity that we were not addressing. And then we started connecting with some of the clinics and began to understand that, obesity, childhood obesity ties into this, and type 2 diabetes. So we began to work alongside health clinics and stuff like that. One thing we realized that we didn't want to do was become a food shelf. We wanted to grow our own food, and we wanted it to be really neighborhood-based, family-based, kid-based. And so that's what we've strove to do. So I'm sitting down here on the Greenway, the Midtown Greenway right now. And about 20 plus years ago, we purchased about 3 to 4 acres down here. And so our urban farm occupies about 1.5 acres of this property that we purchased. So we have 3 greenhouses now down here. And we have chickens here and in Lakeville, and farmland here. That's not enough to feed a lot of the people we need to feed. So we were able to develop a relationship with a church in Lakeville. They gave us 6 acres to use. So we don't pay rent, we get irrigation, we get a lot of help with that. And so it's enabled us to feed work with about 35,000 families last year, all told. About 50,000 pounds of food that we grew. So we're into our 7th year, and we strive to learn from best practices. We don't want to just be we want to be a farm that is serious and takes farming serious. And just because we're in the city doesn't mean we can't be serious. So we love this kind of relationship with Twin Cities growers, Metro growers. It really helps us a lot. So 2 things I do not touch on, which I'm going to give to Julia. Julia is a CFANS grad, and she's in charge of our education and our horticulture stuff. And we're really, really lucky to have her. So besides Julia, it's Gary. So it's just 3 of us running this thing. But I'm going to have her share a little bit about this from an education and what we're doing with that and horticulture. Here's Julia.
Hi, Julia.
Hey everyone. I manage our lands here in Minneapolis. So we grow just a lot of annual rows of veggies, and we get a lot of volunteers that come through to help kind of be our labor pool. And we also employ high school and college interns at different times. So lots of people stop by off the Greenway wanting to help out, and there's lots of ways for the community to get involved in growing the food. So that's fun to have people wanting to get involved, and we have no shortage of helping hands on our location in the Greenway. So that's a really nice aspect of being here. And as far as our education programs, this summer we're partnering with a couple public school summer enrichment programs. So we're going to be hosting field trips for elementary school students, and we also partner with Urban Ventures youth programs. And all those students are able to walk or bike to our site here, so they get to experience some outdoor exercise, growing and harvesting food, and getting to eat the food as well. So that's been pretty cool to be able to tie in all those aspects of health and nutrition into one experience because of the location and resources we have over here.
Oh, I should say this real quick, Carl.
Yeah.
I didn't hit distribution. Distribution really quick.
Yeah.
We're fortunate to be down here. We get a lot of attention. So we have a farm stand that's open every Tuesday and Thursday. And then we have a mobile farmers market truck that goes to schools right to their campuses. So we'll be doing that on, I'm not sure, Mondays, Wednesdays, whatever. So so we have people come to us and then we go to them. So it's kind of been a really great relationship. We have been asked to, participate in CSAs. We've been asked by Seward Co-op to grow lettuce for them. We've been asked, but we really want to stay focused on neighborhood community development. So there's been a lot of opportunities that have come our way, but we feel this is our sweet spot to create sustainability in the life of a kid. So that's how we're looking at sustainability, not financially or programmatically, but if we can get a kid eating right and understanding what they're eating and have some basic knowledge, can that sustain them into young adulthood and to even if they have kids one day or families themselves. So if there was an overall outcome, that would be the one that we really would hope to knock out of the park, would be that kind of personal sustainability, nutrition sustainability.
And it's a Phillips neighborhood, correct?
Yeah, we're in the Phillips.
Right there, Lake Street and the freeway, basically, right along the Greenway.
Yeah, Greg's been by us a lot.
Excellent. Well, I think if I might, that's the overall theme. Everybody's trying to, in their own way, reconnect the dots of a food system that's basically been taken away from us. You've seen about the 10 companies that feed us, the mega corporations that run the show, and we're all trying to reconnect the dots to make a real a food system that works for people and the planet. So that is excellent. Thank you so much, Mark, Peter.
Yeah.
We will hear from David Abbas now, and then we'll open it up, get the discussion rolling. Let's see, David, there you are. Welcome, David.
Well, I applaud sticking to the mission there, Mark, Peter, about keeping the focus. So that's really great. And I thought I'd share with you some slides since you're not able to see what's going on. We come from a small town, Finland, Minnesota, about 400 people. And we've been, what we're looking at is our farm from the cliff that's between us and Lake Superior. That's a picture of our farm. We're about 1.5 miles from Lake Superior. And what's really important about that hill is that it blocks the average cold water temperature that creates in the air. The lake is about 38 degrees on average annually. And so that hill is the difference between lettuce and tomatoes with greenhouses. We all have 120 acres. The back 80 are at the lake, where my wife and I spend a lot of time. And we actually, for 6 months a year, we sleep in this tent. And then we commute back to our farm and our other work. We're surrounded by water, Lake Superior on one side, Kangas Lake on the other, and the creek below. If you see that middle picture of me standing in ice water, you can see behind me is the road that goes up to our house. So often we get flooding and often we have to canoe across this area in the spring or when there's a lot of rain. But to get out for 6 months of the year, we are snowbound. This is our trail to get to the car, about a half mile, 300-foot rise to get up to the farm from there. We're really focused on energy. We're off the grid. We provide our electricity from solar, wind for pumping. I've invented my own gray water system to use less energy on this system. And one of the things we've done is delivered vegetables with our used vegetable oil powered car. We converted the car to run on vegetable oil, which we basically separate out and filter out and run. So it is about 45 miles per gallon with a trailer, about 55 mile per gallon without. A lot of our food that we live on is from wild rice and some wild harvest. So our main grain is wild rice. We do bees. My wife's a beekeeper. But we focused on farming and producing food. We started for many years. We ran a goat dairy and had draft animals and tried to do things in a way that everyone in the world could do, that we have enough energy, enough power to do these things. Over the time, we really ended up focusing on crops. So this is our farm, crop fields. And you know, one of the challenges with growing food up here is that field is on 22 inches to bedrock. Despite that, we've been able to market and do quite well in terms of getting access of food to people that didn't otherwise have it, and also making some money along the way. We've run a CSA for 20 years, online sales, farmers markets, and we continue to shift our operation. We have lots of farm interns. We've probably had about 150 farm interns over the 30 years. And that's been really important. Education has been really important to us for how we function here. Again, one of the challenges is our growing season. We have as short a growing season between frosts of 33 days. One year we had July 15th was a frost, and then August 18th was a frost, 19th, 20th freeze. So that is our shortest growing season. And again, 22 inches down to bedrock. So when we first started growing things, nothing grew. The soil was terrible. We used pigs to clear the cropland to the brushland and made crops. We cover crop, did all that stuff. And with our soil improvement, able to grow a lot of food. So we've been able to grow 3 times as much food as when we, in our first years, as we increased production, increased density of our growings, multi-crops in greenhouses. So this one 16 by, actually 14 by 60 greenhouse produces about 1,000 heads of lettuce and 1,500 pounds of tomatoes. We grow a whole slurry of different crops that we provide to our neighbors and store for ourselves, and have done a good job in trying to create food out of what didn't grow. We are shifting our operation. We're shifting towards seed production. Seed production is a whole nother thing because you actually have to keep the crop and select for the crop. Actually, we didn't sell the best lettuce. We sold the worst lettuce. And so that was new for us. Looking for crops that do well in our climate. This is solstice broccoli. That is a terrible commercial crop because it doesn't all come big at the same time. It will mature over time, which is perfect for a garden. So this is a perfect garden broccoli, big, beautiful heads, but a sporadic production over time, which is not what we like to grow when we were doing it for commercial operations. Grow a lot of garlic, do a lot of research with that, grow a lot of seed. Climate change has posed its challenges. And as we look at climate change, what role can our farm play in that? And I think someone was talking about soils earlier. Growing soils can also be part of the climate solution. On our farm, organic matter, in just looking at organic matter, we started with less than 1% of organic matter. And then over time, we were able to increase it. But at that time, with 0.5% organic matter, we had 5,800 pounds of carbon in that acre. Not a lot of carbon. Now we've gotten it up to 15% organic matter. We're looking at 174,000 pounds of carbon. So guess what? High organic matter is not only good for the climate, it's also good for growing food, absorbing rainfalls, and building in resilience into our system. So really pressured a lot to deal with the health of our soil and the health of our food. To adapt to climate change, use agrophenology. The standard calendar no longer works for us with the changing climate. So we actually monitor different plants, different bugs, different things in nature that tell us a better idea of when things should be planted. So we monitor it. We now use those indicators to determine when to plant which crop. When the lilac's blooming, we plant tomatoes. We also learned that the cutworm damage is in a certain window. We used to plant by the Juneberry flowers, but the cutworms would just cut everything down and eat all the beans. So now we plant after the red osier dogwood flowers. And that removed us around the cycle of the bug within our system. So there's a lot of different ways you can deal with climate change. Another thing we're part of is the Forest System Migration Project. And what is happening here is the woods are dying. When I walk through our forest, it's sick and dying. And so a year ago, through my job at the university, I started working with these folks, Julie Edison and Meredith, on identifying what we could do to help solve our canopy problem into the future. So we looked at tree collection, growers network, tree seedling vendors who buy, started figuring out how to grow these trees and get climate forward seeds from central and southern Minnesota and bring them to the north and grow those. We now have 15 farmers growing 85,000 tree seedlings this year, bringing in income for farmers. And we're now setting up a farmers network to collect these seeds down where Mark Peters is and south of there to get oak seeds, northern red oaks, spur oaks, things like that, that we will then plant in our area. We've also been growing a family over these years and had our first kids in our one-room house with no electricity. We've also been working growing a community. Some of the initiatives I did here in Finland was help started the Wolf Ridge Farm. I left that 2 years ago when I took on the university job. The new director is in the purple there, Sarah. And their goal is to feed all the kids at the school, 165,000 meals in the school. And I also initiated this farm, the Agriculture Center, now that Stefan's running. This was taking an area that was clear cut and then bulldoze the top foot of soil. And you can see one of the deep winter greenhouses there that Greg Swazer's been very instrumental in creating. And creating life out of a dead piece of land by doing hugelkultures, permaculture, and this is all a permaculture farm. So being able to start the farms enabled us to start to build a food system in Finland because we started different farms for different niches of foods we might need in the future. We are part of a Finland food chain, and at the end I can put in a link to that. We got a $210,000 grant and have been building up our food system in all the different aspects that we're looking at. One project, final thing I'll leave you on is this group, Maja Chai. we have been working with them and have now opened up our farmland to share with this group. It's a BIPOC community group to set up a healing center. So they will co-own the land with us, and then put on this operation here, the land sanctuary. So this is an effort of trying to address some of the inequities about land and land access. Since 98% of all agriculture land is owned by white people, historically 14% of the land was owned by Black farmers. We have to figure out how we're going to make this shift back, because without land, there cannot be justice. And so this is another project we're leaning into, and hopefully we'll keep going forward. And I'll just stop sharing at this time. So that's a summary of what we're doing, what we're about, and where we're going and exploring.
Wow, that's excellent, David. I can't wait to come up and see your place. It looks like heaven on earth to me. And the tree project is amazing. I worry about the birch trees. I don't know if we're gonna have any birch trees in central Minnesota, Wisconsin in the future. But being a Scando, I kind of found a birch trees. But thank you so much. And so everybody on board here, not too hard to pick out the similarities of the kind of things people are trying to do. And so how can we, people are doing just amazing things, and we're busy doing those things. And we just got to believe if we could put our heads together and work together across the distance, we can get more done. Why don't we just open it up now? If anybody has any particular questions about the farm or Urban Ventures, or just unmute and chime in, and we'll see what people have to say and what you think.
Say, Carl, I got a quick question for you.
Yes.
David's presentation was just so rich and fantastic. We're going to get that, right? It's going to be recorded, and it's all his slides going to be a part of the recording as well?
This whole thing is being recorded.
His whole presentation? Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
but I don't know if, Dave, you want to share the presentation separately, but you can send that. I don't know if you can link it or whatever. We'll get it to you if you need it.
Yeah, I'll get the link that everyone can look at it with.
Okay.
All right, super. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And if you want, obviously post your questions in the chat. And I put a little thing in there about the organic matter. We talk about burning fossil fuel, which is really ancient organic matter, but plowing fields and tilling over the last centuries has released even more. And we talk about eliminating, getting rid of emissions into the atmosphere, which we need to do, but that's not going to draw anything down. And we need to draw some carbon back out of the atmosphere, a lot of it, and agriculture is the best way to do that, seems to me. They're working on high-tech ways to do it, but
your question, Carl, I've calculated.
Let's hear it.
How much carbon can be pulled down? It's in the quadrillion number.
Yeah. Wes Jackson talks about the carbon ages, cutting down trees to build things, coal, oil, natural gas, but then soil is those are the main sources of too much carbon in the air.
David, I'm going to just jump in here and ask you if
could you identify yourself?
Oh, excuse me. I'm Diane Dodge. I live in St. Paul. I'm part of an organization called Urban Farm and Garden Alliance and the Art of Food in Frogtown and Rondo. And for Urban Farm and Garden Alliance, Carl probably already knows this, I am the official, unofficial troubleshooter, troublemaker, and I decided to join this call for that purpose today. And I'm really so impressed with everything that you've talked about. But I also feel that you have this great presentation and it's yours, and that somehow, if we are going to take advantage of some of these things, what can we do to mutually help you to stay sustainable? You know, this is part of the big problem, is the silos, the fact that this person doesn't talk to that person. And how do we sustain just this kind of thing? I mean, I'm in St. Paul. I've never seen Urban Ventures.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in St. Paul. I've barely touched on anything except some kind of relationship with the things that go on in North Minneapolis. And this keeps getting tried. So how are we going to make it real? How are we going to actually break those silos down and be able to talk to one another?
Yep.
I think that, you know, I mean, I love all these things that are going on, and I really try to spread the news when I can. And I want permission from David to share, and maybe David, you'd even come and be on a Zoom call with a bunch of people from St. Paul. I don't see anyone from Duluth here. I don't see anyone from Rochester here today. It's up to each and every one of us to make sure that we're being inclusive. I also don't see any Black people here today, or BIPOC people that I can recognize.
Correct.
Yeah,
Well, I'm here by phone.
We got Michael Chaney on the phone.
Yeah.
Hi,
How you doing,
Michael
Michael?
Chaney.
Hello, Diane.
Good to hear you.
Long time, Michael.
Well, I think one thing, Diane, is no one can be sustainable alone. And it's part of a system. And I think that sharing the stories are really, really important. And I think putting some of our assumptions and our cultural trainings at the door and opening ourselves up to thinking new ways and new things, I think will be really important. But one thing, there are signs of hope in our region. 4 of the 8 counties have more farmers today than they did 10 years ago, breaking all the trends of agriculture in our country for the last 100 years.
Yep.
The number of the more women owned, and they're smaller in our region. So I think some of us also going to have to give up our land and put it towards trust. So another project we're working on is a Land Access Alliance, which is going to do just that here in the Northeast, get people to donate their land and offer it up to BIPOC women and white farmers that, you know, emerging farmers that can't access land. Land access is huge. Water access is huge. All of these things are part of. And I think the time is now for us all to stop talking and start doing.
Yep.
And what we're looking for examples. So
Yep.
looking for examples like Urban Ventures. We're looking for examples like all these different projects that
Yep.
are doing good works. And what we need to do is expand them and empower them and get out of the way too, for them.
Yes, and that's exactly true. And I think one part of this too is to create safe spaces, you know, where people feel safe going wandering out in the country or checking out North Minneapolis. You know, there's been some divisions in our country of late, but yet, you know, I've spent, for example, a lot of my time out in rural Wisconsin and places, and you know, we have stereotypes of this, that, and other thing, and there's just tons of David Abbas's and great people out there, and there's tons of Diane Dodges and Michael Chaney's, you know, and what was said at our first one, I think it was Nick Olson, because I mentioned, like I think I did earlier, well, people are busy and it's hard for them to rearrange things, and he said, you're only busy as you want to be. You can make the time, but you got to take that pivot. So all these things are working. Go ahead.
I think what David said about giving up land is true. And, you know, we can all do that in little ways. It doesn't have to be big ways. We've this year have made relationships with 3 very small urban growers. They work with kids and they work with families. So we're giving them each part of our land. So we'll be surrendering about maybe close to ½ acre to 3/4 of an acre. And we're training them. These are Hispanic neighbors, Somali neighbors. And we went ahead and built out about 30 raised beds. So we have, you know, in a small way, trying to address what you're saying. And I agree that if we all can just surrender and give up a little bit and keep that spreading, it will add up to a lot.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily given up anything. You know, what we really need to be talking about
Michael,
is...
hey, Michael, you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, my name is Michael Chaney. I'm the founder, executive director of Project Sweetie Pie. Created the first urban farm legislation in the nation with the Agri Grant that any of you that are working, educating young people can go to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and they do RFPs once a year where you can get funding to do your program. And it was modeled after the work of Cleveland and Falwell, who were 2 visionaries who came from out east and felt that nature was the majesty of all people. And so created the Grand Round, which is the envy of the nation. And year after year, we are the pride and joy of the park systems in throughout the nation. And it was only because of their altruism and their vision that we secured that land. And that's really what we wanted to do with that urban farm legislation. Rod Hamilton asked, well, should we just do a pilot project in North Minneapolis? And I said, no, this needs to be, if we're going to maintain our position as you know, as a progressive state that is growing horticulture and agriculture, then we have to be about the training of the next generations of farmers. And so that's why we didn't want to just do a pilot. We wanted to. The thing, unfortunately, we were really trying to do was get land set aside, you know, so that, you know, 150 years from now, in across that if land was set aside that 150 years from now, every blade of grass was covered by asphalt or concrete. And so that's the level of thinking that we really need to be addressing, you know, not this growing season or next growing season, but if we're really going to create a sustainable society, an equitable society, we really need to be thinking generations from now and really figuring out what is it that we want to secure, what is it that we want to build, and how do we secure that? When I hear Mr. Abbas talking about, you know, land, a land trust, that's the kind of model that I think we all need to be securing, so that, again, you're not giving up anything. What we're doing is we're really providing for the greater good and making sure that there's a renaissance for the American farm, and that not all of us abandon that vision, that because, again, there was a reason why farmers were known as salt of the earth. And that's the kind of philosophy, the kind of spirituality that we are trying to move forward in North Minneapolis and beyond, in terms of what are we building? What does it look like? Who needs to be the stakeholders and the shared partnerships in these alliances? And so this summer we're going to be doing a North Minneapolis's first food forest, and to address Diane's concerns around the siloed approach. The initiative, the garden is called Celestial Garden, a gathering place for God's grace. The initiative is called Shared Fruit. Urban policy, urban planning, urban forestry, urban farming, urban by design. And so we're going to use it as a showroom where it's not just Project Sweetie Pie, but it's kind of our showroom for the future in terms of how do we bring people who've been shut out of the American dream? How do we invite them to the table, give them voice? Number two, how do we go about breaking out of these silos so it's not just this singular, angular, one-dimensional approach, but we're all working collaboratively, collectively, co-creating and co-designing. And number three, how do we do urban development, land development, equitable land development from the bottom up rather than the top down? Those are top down approach is really the heart and soul of when we talk about institutional racism. It's because those people who were policymakers created devices, tools of the trade that enriched them, enriched their communities, but it left many people, out of the picture. And so I use the language planting, let equity and inclusion be the seeds that fuel our future.
Excellent.
So I like the land trust. I've been arguing with Susan Schmidt for 10 years that we really have to, that we've got in terms of what the commons is, we have to go beyond schools. We have to go beyond parks. We have to go beyond libraries and really think of community development as the commons where communities can control the sovereignty of their community, and so that outside arbitrators aren't coming in and stealing their lunch money.
Amen. And, Michael, when we talk about urban land and urban spaces and, people talk about sacred ground, sacred land, and I like to say there isn't any. It's all sacred. And so
Right.
any, urbans, the wildlife in urban areas doesn't know that's not wild land, and we can rewild most places. And we need to stop thinking of urban kind of wasteland, industrial wasteland, and then they've got these little parks we can go to. Similar arguments of agriculture versus the environment. And we've been arguing for years, no, ag is the environment in most places. So thank you for that. Anybody else want to chime in now? I'm going to pick some names, Sal or Kylie or Kia. You got anything to add? Let's all just jump in here. Any reflections? And then in a bit, we're going to talk about some next steps, perhaps.
Oh, this is Jim Chamberlain.
Hi, Jim.
I guess I want to just throw this out, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go with it. I guess it's so I'm urban Minnesota or rural Minnesota. I work for Happy Dancing Turtle, a nonprofit in Pine River, and we currently are working as a technical service provider for the NRCS. Working with I'm working primarily with conventional farmers, mostly small scale, and focused heavily on grazing, because I believe, that's one of the most important parts of the soil health principles is integrating livestock. There's huge potential in soil health right now, even on large scale farms. And I think almost all these larger scale, I guess bigger farmers, the ones under 1,000 acres, most of them I'm working with are 80 acres to 500, I think is the largest one I'm working with. And they want change. They want to see something different. And the way the system's built makes it really hard for them. There's so many issues around marketing and infrastructure and investment into the system they have, the failing system that they have now, that change is just really hard. And but these are really, there's a different attitude in the rural areas. And I guess I want to go back to my solution, my pathway that was discussed in the chat about a conservation farm core, a conservation grazing core. If we want to change and break down silos, we need to open up and build relationships between rural and urban. areas. The farmers I work with would likely be insulted if I told them they were racist. They wouldn't believe me, but I don't know that they understand cultural bias, maybe. And my education around cultural bias and racism has been increased substantially in the last several years. So I guess that's what I want to throw out there. I don't know where that goes, but you know, Mark Peter and the work you're doing down at Urban Ventures, I guess I've heard of it before, but I didn't know it was as great as you guys are doing. And David, every time I hear you talk, and I'm more impressed with you, as well as Michael. So.
All right. It's great, man.
I'd like to respond to that commentary, Michael Chaney. I've been having conversations with, renewing the countryside, and I'll take that out, one further. Let's renew the country side too. And that means that let's rethink let's build a cultural land bridge between the rural community and the urban community. What is it that we share that we need to look the issues? There's information we can aggregate. There's tools that we can aggregate. There's land that we can aggregate. There's education that we can aggregate. There's grants that we can aggregate. There's produce that we can aggregate. And there's advanced education that we can aggregate. And so I think that if we we look at Minnesota as our field of dreams, and we really look at this the Biden rescue plan, we look at the Black Justice Farm Act, and we really look at how are we rethinking and retooling the use of land that is underutilized, undercapitalized, and think of it as our shared fruit, our shared collective resource, our land base, and then really build out from that, where all of us, instead of us thinking, again, individually, which the way that we've been trained through, this great thing called capitalism, let's think about looking at the model that Land of Lakes and some of those folks back in the early genesis of that organization, let's think about it as a collective, where then we can blanket these underutilized spaces, underutilized workforce, and really think about what you just brought up, sir, in terms of a conservation corps. A farm conservation corps, which is part and parcel of the Black Justice Access Plan. So in preparation for that kind of model, I just spent the last month down in Georgia, where I'm trying to create an exchange program bringing rural youth and scholars from the South to the North to the University of Minnesota as a junction box, and then bringing youth and scholars from the North down to Shirley Sherrod, who was in the Obama administration in the Department of Agriculture, owns an 1,800 acre plantation. And so that they grow 200 acres of pecans, oranges, and Kali Gradick, who many of you may know or have known over the years. Kali spent 25 years working with the Department of Agriculture. And so him and I have been talking about this model, this idea that I have for an exchange program. And so either working in tandem with that potential project where we can do some cultural sensitivity training and really go back. I'm a bit of a time traveler. I like to go backwards in time and then come forward in time so that we can redress the shortcomings. And so the same thing that we are doing or in the process of trying to do in advance of the Black Justice Land Access Bill, we should be thinking about collectively as a state, working in partnership with the University of Minnesota to really assess where do we have land, where do we have farmers, where do we have underutilized farms that could really then be incubators for the kind of training, education, experiential learning, intergenerational wealth transfer, and look at this as Minnesota as one big field that we want to put into production for vegetable food production. And I go beyond urban farming, vegetable farming, to really talk about local food production, because I think that until the measure of equity for me looks like when the shelves in our grocery stores reflect the diversity of our community, then we know that we're headed in the right direction.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. Michael and I worked on a lot of projects over the years, and he's brilliant at wrapping it all together. And I like the emphasis on policy. You know, people don't like politics and don't like policy. I put in a thing there about the Farm Bill. That's where all the action is. People grow corn and beans. Why do they grow all these corn and beans? That's what they get paid for. So with that, I think it's a good segue. So I think you got a gist of what can happen with urban-rural exchanges, how we're more powerful together. And so maybe now, Greg, maybe you have some thoughts, but we're going to continue this discussion with different folks and include as many people as we can. Again, if you have the time, look at our previous presentation. Very similar and awesome people said a lot of the same kinds of things. I mean, I think I don't know about you, but now is the time, and with equity being included with sustainability, it's so powerful, and it's been the piece that's been missing. As I think Mark, Peter, or Julia mentioned, you know, when a little kid grows a tomato and they look at a tomato and they eat it, it's super powerful. They go to the grocery store and they see a tomato, and now they go, oh, now I know what that is. And, you know, this the whole aspect of young people being able to get out in the country and see the stars and all that sort of thing. So there's just so many ways to go. So again, we're taking little steps at a time, and we're going to have some meetings after this and try and figure out next steps. To be real intentional about to be mutually beneficial, you know, so a lot of things were mentioned. Greg, you have anything to add to that, what I just said about next steps?
Well, I'm not sure. That's kind of a bigger question.
Yeah.
The things that I plan to do is somehow connect this group in these conversations with our rural partners within the regional partnership. And I know some of you, well, for example, David, who's staff on my organization, and Jim Chamberlain, who's been on our board. Some of you are crossover folks and some of you are rural. So we're glad that you're here right now to make these little connections. But I think one of the things that I'm hoping to do in the near future is present these presentations, do something sort of similar like this with our rural stakeholders in greater Minnesota. And then after that, at some point, hopefully not too far in the future that it becomes old, but do something where all of us can get together, maybe around some sort of facilitated discussion or something like that. But somehow that urban folks that are on this call and the call before, and rural folks that we'll be connecting with soon, can really, at least for the time being, virtually get together, share stories, share concerns, share ideas. And then really, I mean, this, unfortunately, for extension for our organization, at the very least, we aren't able to do public meetings until September. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's further than that also. And that's kind of the end of the season anyhow. But I think that if all goes well, we're really setting ourselves up well to do something thoughtfully and well planned with a good connection of folks next growing season. I don't think that's ideally it would be sooner, but that would be a good alternative option. So in the meantime, though, one of the things that I'd be curious to know, if you all have my email address or want to call or connect, or if there's still some time here, what do you see? What do people think of as things that would be helpful for conversations, for continued connections with across those urban-rural divides? What are the big dreams for how we can come together? And I've seen some good ideas in the chat, and I've heard some good ideas come out of folks talking today. But any brainstorming around those? What are some specific ideas, or even vague and general ideas for how we come together, how we want to come together, what that looks like, and what we hope to get out of that?
Marita, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you've organized these. I wanted to come last week and wasn't able to make it, but what attracted me was the very idea that we need to talk about urban and rural communities working together. And just recently, Senator Murphy, who happens to be my senator in Minnesota Senate, commented and that, the divide between our communities is a created divide, one that really only exists because there have been policies that have been put in place. There have been ideas promoted that somehow we should be divided instead of connected. And I think that food is, and our challenge for building a truly sustainable food economy is a means for us to build those bridges. And I wanted to mention that the Headwaters Community Food and Water Bill, which Goli Her authored in the House this year, and Senator Murphy in the Senate, and which MN 350 Action is promoting, actually has resources in it to help urban and rural communities work together to build those relationships effectively around a truly regenerative source to table food economy. The resources would be in that system to make that happen deliberately, intentionally. So we find ourselves building relationships precisely so that we can do what we need to do to meet the demands of food, water, and climate. The other thing I want to mention is that the House Select Committee on Racial Justice actually recommends this bill. They made a statement in December when they created their report. And I believe the reason they did is because it's intended to really provide the resources we need to create a truly sustainable system that is available for everyone to participate and benefit. So the work that David's doing with Land Trust, the work that they're doing, for instance, at the former Main Street project, where they built a land trust, this is one of the ways that this bill could help by providing land for BIPOC farmers who have been intentionally sidestepped and pushed off the land. But there's a whole system that it creates so that we can be effective in moving forward. I think there's nothing more promising really than considering how we can be together as a state to address food and water and climate. It's the biggest challenge we face. And the purpose of this bill is to help us do that.
And there's just so much noise that we have to bust through that keeps coming into our heads from all angles and keeps, the press loves this kind of thing. Urban rural divide. Oh my God. And I say it's at once real and artificial. I mean, there's some reality there for sure. Marita, do you have links to that Headwaters effort or some of those things you mentioned?
Yeah.
You can just stick them in the chat. That would be good.
I'll see if I can. I've never been able to successfully put a link in a chat. I don't know what's the matter with me, but
now keep trying.
Yeah.
Yep. Carl, one of the things that I would have you and Greg do, since you've been kind of coaching and pulling this together, is to create a survey, you know, that all of your folks that have already been on these calls, that you can, that a summary of what it is that they have, what it is, kind of the who, what, where, why, and when. And that begins the process of really information is power. And that begins to start at least logging and recording those that have been part of these conversations. And then it can be then something that can be shared internally with the work within all of those who have participated within these fireside chats. But it can also really do the groundbreaking work of some of the stuff that Greg and I are working on with the University of Minnesota and the department. They got a 3-year grant, University of Minnesota and Minnesota Department of Ag. And so if there was a general kind of profile, then we could at least know who's been in these conversations, what it is that people are doing in kind of a thumbnail, kind of cliff note version. And then any of folks that have been on the calls, or what it is that, you know, what is it that you have to offer? What is it that you'd like to do? How many acres of land do you have? Do you have a need for workforce? You know, now we then start accumulating information through these conversations, and it becomes a tool that can be moved forward into that marketing grant that, and I'll let Greg, because I'm not good with acronyms, I'll let him explain what the project is, but it's a 3-year project, which ultimately is to identify farmers and market opportunities. And so this, I would see these conversations that you're doing right now could actually be a good feeder system into that process that is going to be rolled out over the course of the next 3 years. It's being led by Hikaru Peterson over at the U, Helen Schnolz. And Greg, would you fill in the blanks?
Sure, just briefly. Our information that we collect around agricultural production is essentially information around commodity scale production. All of the CSA farms, all of the farmers market farms, all of the people selling on farm stands. It's too finely granular, too fine scaled to be really well counted by the United States Department of Agriculture. So when we look through the ag census to kind of get a good sense and understanding of what farming looks like in Minnesota, that stuff just falls through the cracks. So what Dr. Hikaru Peterson is trying to do is find a way to count that, so we can kind of get a better understanding of how many farms there are that are selling directly to consumers, that are selling food products that are ready to eat, that are selling essentially things other than, you know, commodity corn and soybean is obvious, but even like large orchards get picked up in that, or people growing peas and vegetables for Green Giant, you know, those types of places become the only things we understand of as our fruit and vegetable producers. And that's really not the kind of farming that a lot of us are talking or thinking about. So the Department of Ag has a project, a large 3-year grant project to work with Hikaru Peterson, get a better understanding of what the farming system looks like, and figure out ways to use that information to improve their programs, and their programs specifically around Forever or Minnesota Grown, which is the Department of Ag's marketing service, small farm marketing service that helps people sell directly, and through the regulatory services. So the reg services help people do things like get in line for good agricultural practices, and not FSMA, yeah, FSMA, FSMA and other things. So sort of a large reckoning for small farming in Minnesota, getting a good sense of what's going on, who's doing it, and trying to figure out how the Department of Ag can improve its programming to help all those people.
So the work that you guys, Carl and Greg, are doing with this certainly could be a feeder to that project. And the folks that you're talking with on these conversations, we could really start amassing and accumulating, knowing what folks are doing over at Urban Ventures, learning to, if we could create a tool that gives us some of that rudimentary information and creates a farm profile. And again, basically for both folks who are growing vegetables and the like, small scale, we can actually expedite that project and begin it through this effort here to gather that information, exchange that information with folks that have been on these calls. And then out of that, folks can take their own initiatives to reach out to David, to reach out to, the folks at Urban Ventures. I think that by you staging these conversations, you're setting the table and encouraging people to start doing their own inquiry, their own initiative to really reach out, visit each other, learn about each other, and see how it is that we might partner, collaborate, or do business together.
Absolutely. That's where we're headed. And that's the whole idea of networking, is get people to network and call each other and whatever they need to do and just break down those barriers. So that is so right on, Michael. Thank you so much for that.
Well, I'll call you, Carl, because I'd be willing to help go through and think through what are some of those questions, and then let's get it on paper. And folks that come into these conversations, folks that have already been there and they've gone on, we can get that tool to them, that survey to them, and then that can be part of the body of work that is produced out of these conversations.
No, that sounds good. We'll have to figure out a good way to do that. But it kind of reminds me, MDA had their farm link, I think it's called, where people could look for farmland, and it was just a really simple, rudimentary thing. Hopefully, the budget talks here, they're going to get a whopping 50 grand to improve that. But the problem with the internet is it's so wonderful. You can just click and connect to people. On the other hand, there's so many different ways to do that. It just becomes a jungle. It's just too many networks. So that the challenge is always that one-stop shop that everybody's looking for. But maybe that'd be part of it. But that's an excellent idea. And you don't have to be a farmer. You don't have to run an urban venture. You just have to be a person that wants to be part of the food system. And what I like to say is, if you eat food, you're part of the food system. That's what the food system is about, and we've been cut off that. It's so simple, right? But that's what this is all about. That's excellent. We'll definitely follow up on that. That's a great suggestion. Anybody else have some questions, comments? Sal, go ahead.
Yeah.
And Sal, just a brief introduction. Who are you?
I'm Sal. I currently am a farmer in Western Wisconsin. So this will be our 4th year. Our farm is called Rooster Haven. We've gone through a lot of changes over these few years.
Where in Wisconsin? Where in Wisconsin?
We're just south of Deer Park, which is about halfway between Amory and New Richmond, Wisconsin, in St. Croix County.
Beautiful country.
Yeah, and so I guess I really appreciate listening to this. And I also spent 11 months doing some urban ag work in the cities, food group through like an AmeriCorps program. So I'm a little bit familiar with working in kind of the urban agriculture realm as well as this rural agriculture realm. And just hearing about this like rural urban divide, it kind of seems to me like it's leaving out the suburbs. And to me, like I see a lot more connections between like very rural people and very urban people. Like we're very, there's a lot of community involvement. There's a lot of like economic issues that we're facing, and like a lot of, there's a lot of thoughtfulness of why we're living this way. And I almost see we're getting this suburban sprawl out here in St. Croix County, and it scares me so much. Right now we're renting land and we're trying to buy a farm. And my partner and I, we both work because we're trying to make enough money to buy farmland. And when we look around, we're like, we are privileged, we're white, and we still are like, we don't make enough money, and this is kind of a land access issue. But, we see the land around us just being split into these 1/4 acre, 5 acre plots, and it's just taking over the countryside. And I'm like, yeah, the suburbs, man, that's freaking me out. Like, I feel, I could go into the cities or have people come out here. And like, I think we have a lot of connections, but I just don't get why people want to live, shoulder to shoulder in their own isolated little houses. So I'm just wondering if that can kind of factor into these future urban rural divide conversations is, man, how do we get who's living in the suburbs and how do we get them involved?
Yeah, I hear what you say about the suburbs. Community development designed around the automobile. Suburbs is a big mistake, but we're stuck with them. And there's a lot of green land in the suburbs. Boy, I drive through the Hennepin suburbs and it just floors me every time. And they're going great guns. They can't build fast enough. And I don't know how to stop that profit cycle. It's just what they do. But those are great comments. Yeah. That's the first time I think suburb was ever mentioned in these last two conversations. Thank you for that. And thank you for your work that you do.
That's truly interesting to me, who lives in Little Ramsey County, where just about every bit of land is municipal now. And I spent 9 years on the Food and Nutrition Commission. And to get anybody to listen to anything was extremely difficult, shall we say. I'd be interested in having Sal. I'm in, we have land in Dunn County, and we're thinking about land trust right now. And also, there's a group called Amory United. Look it up. Look it up, please, because they're working on issues of social justice. You probably know about it already.
I'm working with them, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, we're getting out of the farmers market, and so we're going to have a lot of excess produce this year, and they're going to help us donate it to people that can use it.
It's a small world after all.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Well, I want to be respectful of people's time. It's 3 o'clock. We can definitely keep chatting, but if you need to hop off, please feel free to do so, of course. And we are just starting this thing, and we're gonna take all these suggestions. Not exactly sure the next steps, but we're gonna keep it together. We're gonna keep moving, and we're gonna keep connecting the dots. And we can share the emails with everybody and get a conversation going on email maybe. But also if people want to, maybe that'll be the very first start of Michael Chaney's idea. What I want to do now is, let's see, is Urban Ventures still with us? I think they, well, I was going to give them kind of the last word. David, any last parting thoughts, ideas before we head out?
No, I just would love to host, anyone that wants to come up, camp on the land, and have a place to kind of explore another place. And I'd love to also connect and vice versa, and be invited to their community. So I hope this can open a nice exchange and see where we can go with it.
Yeah,
David,
maybe,
I'd like to.
I'm thinking of a retreat would be awesome. Your place looks glorious.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll keep the ball rolling. I do sense that there's a great coming together, and COVID has been awful in so many ways, but from that awfulness, I think we've all had our eyes open to some really major things in the system that we've been ignoring. And so from great catastrophe comes opportunities and challenges, I guess I would say. All right, well, it's a beautiful day. I'm going to turn off this TV. I'm going to turn off this computer and go out there, check out the garden. And thank you all so much. Stay tuned. We have your emails, and we will be in touch one way or the other.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.